Okay, so you know how there's been this like huge reaction from the pharmaceutical industry to Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Oh yeah, it's intense. Like something's really spooked them.
Right. And we're gonna like deep dive into what's behind that today.
Yeah, unpack it.
Using this conversation from the Ring of Fire on YouTube.
It's a good one. Gets into some really interesting points.
So to start off, one of the things they talked about was this whole issue of like pharmaceutical advertising and how the US and New Zealand are like the only countries that let drug companies just advertise straight to consumers on TV.
Yeah, you know those ads we see all the time for like prescription meds.
Right. And the argument is that this is actually like a really bad thing.
Oh, totally. It can totally mess with the whole dynamic between like a patient and their doctor.
Yeah, because like imagine you're a doctor and your patient comes in and they're like, I saw this ad for this drug on TV. Can I have it?
Yeah, it's like they're coming in with a predetermined solution
Right.
before they've even like fully explained what's wrong.
Exactly. And the discussion pointed out that like the pharmaceutical lobby was super powerful back in the 90s.
They really were.
And they basically like convinced Congress to let them do this direct-to-consumer advertising.
Yeah, and now the worry is that Kennedy might try to undo that.
Which would be like a massive shift for the industry.
Absolutely. They have to rethink like their whole marketing strategy.
Right, like they spend so much money on these TV ads.
It's billions.
So that's like one big concern that came up in this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But then they also went deeper into the whole like financial side of the medical and pharmaceutical world.
Yeah, how it's all interconnected.
And they mentioned this group that gets funding from both like drug companies and medical groups.
Uh-huh.
And apparently this group also gets a ton of money from Democratic donors.
There was this report from Sludge on Monday that like detailed all the donations.
Yeah, and Sludge is known for like really digging into lobbying and political influence.
Exactly. So it raises the question like, does all this money affect how these groups view things?
Right, and then there's that letter from like 15,000 doctors who are against Kennedy.
It makes you wonder if there's a connection there, right? Like, is the industry money somehow influencing these doctors' opinions?
It really gets you thinking about how intertwined the pharmaceutical and doctor industries are.
Oh, they're totally connected.
And the discussion went into like doctor kickbacks and these fancy events they get invited to.
Oh yeah, the sponsor trips, the entertainment, it's a whole thing.
And then there's like those doctors who are paid a ton of money to basically promote certain drugs.
The key opinion leaders.
Yeah, like they mentioned one case where doctors were getting like $500,000 per speech.
Wow, per speech.
During the whole opioid crisis.
That's a lot of money.
It is. And this perspective is coming from someone who spent 40 years as a lawyer suing pharmaceutical companies.
Oh, wow. So they've seen it all.
They have, and they're saying they consistently see this link between the industry and doctors who benefit financially.
It's an interesting perspective for sure.
Yeah. But it's also important to consider like the other side of the argument. You know?
Absolutely. Like, we can't just assume all doctors are swayed by money.
Right. And the speaker in the discussion actually brought that up themselves.
They did.
Yeah. They were like, okay, if we're questioning doctors' motives because of industry ties, can we really say that lawyers are any better?
That's a fair point.
Right, because lawyers get paid by their clients too, and sometimes those clients are big pharma companies.
It's true. Like, financial incentives exist everywhere. It's not just a doctor thing.
And the speaker was also really upfront about how their own experience might have shaped their views.
Oh, that's good self-awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They said that spending so long dealing with what they called like the worst of the worst in the pharmaceutical world might have like warped their perspective.
Right, like they've mostly seen the negative side of things.
So it's like their view is definitely informed by that experience.
Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't invalidate their observations.
Totally just adds context.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, moving on to what Kennedy actually wants to do.
Okay, what are the big concerns he's raising?
Well, one thing is he's pushing for like clearer rules on when clinical data from drug trials has to be made public.
Oh yeah, transparency. That's a big one.
Exactly, because then like doctors and patients could see all the information and make more informed decisions.
Which might not always align with what the drug companies want people to know.
Right. And he's also interested in looking into the relationship between the pharmaceutical industry and the FDA.
That whole revolving door thing where people go back and forth between working for the industry and working for the agency that's supposed to regulate it.
Yeah. And you can see why that would raise some eyebrows.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, is there potential for conflicts of interest there?
Right. But it's kind of interesting because while those are the issues that seem to be freaking out the industry,
Yeah.
most of the public conversation around Kennedy has been about vaccines.
Ah, right. his stance on vaccine safety.
And that's probably why those 15,000 doctors wrote that letter, you know.
It seems like that's their main concern.
So there's this kind of disconnect between what the industry is worried about and what the public is focusing on.
It's interesting how those two things are playing out separately.
And speaking of that letter from the doctors, they bring up the fact that Kennedy is a lawyer by trade.
Implying that he shouldn't be talking about health issues.
Yeah, but the counter argument is like, just because you're a lawyer doesn't mean you can't be knowledgeable about health stuff.
Right. Like, what if you're a lawyer who works to get dangerous products off the market?
Exactly. You're going to learn a lot about health in that process.
And they made this analogy about how, like, just being a lawyer wouldn't automatically qualify you to run the CDC.
Yeah, or be Surgeon General.
Or even be the best Attorney General, even though you're a lawyer.
Right. It's about having the right expertise for the job. And someone even suggested that Kennedy might be better suited for a position like heading the EPA.
Oh, yeah, where his environmental background would be super relevant.
Exactly. But then the conversation took another turn and they started talking about like distrust of organized medicine. Oh, interesting.
Specifically the AMA.
What were they saying about the AMA?
They brought up this example of how the AMA initially fought against lawsuits against the tobacco industry.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. And they suggested it was because the AMA had ties to the insurance industry, which used to be connected to tobacco.
Huh. So it's like a whole web of connections again.
It is. And they're basically arguing that the AMA's current opposition to Kennedy is because of their close ties to Big Pharma.
They're afraid of the changes he might bring.
Right, because those changes could impact the pharmaceutical industry, which would then impact the AMA.
I see.
So it all comes back to that.
It's fascinating how everything's connected.
It really is.
So basically the pharmaceutical industry is freaking out because they think Kennedy could actually shake things up.
Yeah, and it goes beyond just disagreeing with his views on healthcare. It's about real fear of losing power and money.
Like he could change how they advertise, how they're regulated, how much scrutiny they're under. Exactly. And despite all this opposition, the person speaking in the video seemed pretty confident that Kennedy could still succeed.
They did?
Yeah, they were like, Kennedy is strong. He might just prevail.
Huh. That's interesting. They seem to really believe in his chances.
Did they even briefly mention like how they thought Trump's nominees would be successful, but that felt kind of random.
Yeah, a little off topic.
But anyway, the main takeaway here is that there's a lot of anxiety swirling around the pharmaceutical industry right now.
Yeah, they're not happy about the possibility of Kennedy having more influence.
And we've really dug into like the specific reasons for that anxiety today.
We talked about worries over direct-to-consumer advertising, going away the role of industry, funding the whole question of whether we can trust doctors and organized medicine.
Exactly. And it's really important for you, our listener, to remember that we're just exploring the ideas from the Ring of Fire discussion.
We're not saying we agree or disagree with any of it, just trying to understand what they're saying.
So here's a thought for you to consider. After all this, like with all the money and all the interconnectedness in healthcare, how can we as individuals make sure we're getting accurate information and making the best decisions for our health?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? How do we navigate all this complexity and find reliable sources we can trust?
And what role does transparency play in all of this?
Yeah, because without transparency, it's really hard to know who to believe.
Exactly. So that's something to think about.
Definitely food for thought.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been great unpacking all this with you.
Until next time.
See ya.